Today, it's the 14th of January, 2022. It's Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to The Anthony Davis Show. I'm here for a couple of hours to spend the morning with you. We're going to chat, spend some time together, get to know each other a little bit. You're welcome to get in touch in the usual way. All you have to do is wake up your device, say, and then your message, or you can go via backchannel.tv, which is a chat facility. You can put it in your browser. Backchannel is the only place you can listen to, watch, and chat with hosts of live shows right here on your device. If you've got an Echo Show device, you'll get the full features of this program. Okay, lots of ways to get involved. So listen in, take part, have your say, write reviews online, give us some subjects or pointers or what you want us to discuss. We'll do it all. Today we're going to look at the Mel Green Institute, who are to combat human trafficking. That's been created. We'll look at human trafficking, aka modern slavery in America. Also, the US Supreme Court has blocked President Joe Biden's rule requiring workers at large companies to be vaccinated or tested weekly. We'll take a look at that story in more detail. And also on this day in American history, on January 14, 1784, the Continental Congress ratified the Treaty of Paris, ending the War of Independence. We'll take a look. Little history lesson at the end of the program as well. We've also got the morning newspapers to look at. We'll find out what's happening where you are, and if you have a local newspaper you'd like to tip us off about, then we'll cover that one too. We're going to start with the Bradenton Herald this morning for which area is this? I always forget which one. Oh, it's Florida. That's right. It's Florida. We'll do a couple. We'll do three from Florida to start with. Senate maps put Democrats into same South Florida districts is their headline. It says as many as 4 South Florida Democrats and no Republicans will be drawn into districts with another state senator. Under a redistricting map, a key Florida Senate committee has scheduled to approve on Thursday, the first day of the legislative session. Senate Reapportion Committee Chair Ray Rodriguez quietly selected 2 redistricting maps, one for Congress and the other for the state Senate, from dozens of submitted pages. Dozens. I have no idea how this system works. You know, I find it quite remarkable that people submit these potential districting maps and then one person gets to choose which is their favorite map. I think it's hilarious. It's like a competition in a primary school of who can draw the best picture of the world. Yeah, grade school or preschool, pre-K, elementary school. So many options. But let's be honest, I think my daughter's at the age of 6 has probably done better work than some of those maps. A photograph of some manatees crowding together near the warm water outflows from Florida Power and Light's plant in Riviera Beach. An unprecedented experimental attempt to feed manatees facing starvation in Florida has started slowly. But wildlife officials expressed optimism it will work as cold weather drives the marine mammals towards warmer waters. Yeah, I mean, the manatee subject has become a big one on the East Coast. It's very interesting. Oh, Michael's joined us. Michael, good morning. You're always on time. In Virginia, thank you for coming to spend the morning with Backchannel. Strawberry shortcake could become Florida's state dessert. Well, maybe that's a good nickname for Ron DeSantis. We could call him Strawberry Shortcake. I'm totally down for that, by the way. Let's try and remember to do that from now on. The Florida governor, Strawberry Shortcake. I think it would be a really nice nickname. I've enjoyed many a strawberry shortcake. In fact, I'm enjoying one now. It says Florida already has an official state pie, key lime. That's right. Key lime pie is not nice. It's not nice. To me, it tastes of medicine. But it might soon designate strawberry shortcake as the official state dessert. The House Public Integrity and Elections Committee unanimously approved a bill on Wednesday. This is what your tax dollars are going to, by the way. This is what they're doing, you know? Banning abortion and welcoming the strawberry shortcake. They're to bestow the honor on strawberry shortcake after some good-natured scrutiny. As a fan of key lime pie, I have little concern that this would prioritize strawberry shortcake as a state dessert, said Republican Representative Erin Grawl, who asked bill sponsor Representative Lauren McClure if he would amend his bill to make the tasty treat the official state cake. Isaiah has joined us. Good morning, Isaiah. Nice to know you're on the back channel this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you're at. We're discussing human trafficking and strawberry shortcake as the state snack of Florida. Pick your favorite. Pick your favorite. And also $8,000 reward offered in deadly Bradenton shooting. This is, they've identified Anthony S. Raming as a murder suspect in a deadly shooting, and they're offering a reward to help find him. So there we go. That's how the Bradenton Herald for Florida is looking this morning. Let's go to Carla. Carla can't contain herself. The concept of the strawberry shortcake dominating the headlines. It's true. It's very funny. The Hernando son is next. Mel Green Institute to Combat Human Trafficking formed. Yeah, this is what we're going to discuss in some detail later. St. Leo University and the Pasco Sheriff's Office have jointly created the Mel Green Institute to Combat Human Trafficking. St. Leo University and a Pasco Sheriff's Office agency have named the institute for the late Spring Hill resident and philanthropist Melvin T. Mel Green. Green passed away in 2020 at the age of 92 after a life spent helping others in his adopted state of Florida and beyond. So, yeah, we'll look at that a little bit later. Springstead hosts basketball tournament for local charity, and Historic Hernando Preservation Society honors local historian. This is the Brooksville City Hall is to honor Mabel Sims, a local conservator of African American history in Hernando County, in recognition of her contributions to preserving the heritage of this important segment of the community. So there we go. And Governor Strawberry Shortcake is doing the State of the Address. It says, the State of Address is prepared for delivery. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, members of the legislature, and fellow citizens, together we have made Florida the freest state in these United States. While so many around the country have consigned the people's rights to the graveyard, Florida has stood as freedom's vanguard, is what the Strawberry Shortcake says. So there we go. That's something to look forward to from Ron DeSantis. Next, the Florida Times Union is upon us. DeSantis' plan for using Fed money. It says Governor Ron DeSantis, brackets, strawberry shortcake, $99.7 billion state budget proposal, heavily supported by federal COVID-19 recovery dollars, is getting its first reviews from Florida lawmakers in the newly opened 2022 session. And for outnumbered Florida Democrats, frustrations are mounting. DeSantis, who regularly spars with the Biden administration, is using $3.8 billion in federal aid money to cover some of his most eye-catching initiatives in the spending plan, even though every Republican member of the U.S. House and Senate voted against the relief spending. So his colleagues in the federal government, they're like, no, we're not going to pay any more money. It's enough already with the money. DeSantis is like, give me the $3.8 billion. I am just going to spend it on all of my favorite things. I wonder if he's going to spend it on the lifetime supply of strawberry shortcake, or potentially the kind of National Guard that responds only to him. They don't answer to the federal government. Something to look forward to, isn't it? Charges fly in casino initiative battle. Accusations include sabotage and conspiracies. Just another day in Florida, by the sounds of it, a court battle involving a proposed constitutional amendment that would open the door to casinos in North Florida continued to escalate this week, with a committee linked to the Seminole tribe accusing backers of the measure of engaging in a widespread election law conspiracy in the race to gather enough signatures to place the initiative on the November ballot. And then a father raising awareness after his son's suicide. And this is Daryl Rosenberger, decided after the death of his son to cross the country by jumping rope and walking. It's very sad, isn't it? So there we go. That's the Florida Times Union on this Friday morning. The New York Times is next for this January the 14th. We're 2 weeks into the 2022 already. How did that even happen? You know? And here's the big story, which we'll be covering later. Of course, Justice's reverse vaccine mandate on big employers. Blow to Biden's agenda, requirement for healthcare workers stands. Well, of course, this is why it went to the Supreme Court, because anything that goes to the Supreme Court now is invariably going to be lost by the Democrats because of the majority conservative Supreme Court. It said the Supreme Court on Thursday blocked the Biden administration from enforcing a vaccine or testing mandate for large employers, dealing a blow to a key element of the White House's plan to address the pandemic, as coronavirus cases resulting from the Omicron variant are on the rise. But in a modest victory for Biden, the court allowed a more limited mandate requiring healthcare workers at facilities receiving federal money to be vaccinated. The vote in the employer mandate was 6-3, with the Liberal justices in dissent. The vote in the healthcare case was 5-4, with Chief Justice John G. Roberts Jr. and Justice Brett Kavanaugh, I like beer, joining the Liberal justices to form a majority. The employer decision undercut one of Biden's most significant attempts to tame the virus and left the country with a patchwork of state laws and policies, largely leaving companies and businesses on their own. Well, this is the problem, isn't it? That a country that's this big, that's this spread out, that relies on people self-policing and self-arming and self-protecting, is not, it's going to be very hard to tell somebody who lives in a rural place that they have to follow these types of guidelines. It's just psychologically, I think it's very difficult for people to get their heads around. And I personally don't know that a vaccine mandate is the way to go. I'm not convinced that Biden got that right. And I think that Biden's jumped the gun a little bit. I think he could have spent more time explaining and debugging the system with, people's insecurities about the vaccine. Because I still talk to people and they're like, I won't take an mRNA vaccine because it's not tested. And I just wish that Biden had invested more money in explaining to people the benefits of these vaccines and also the crux of why they are not dangerous. Because the right-wing media is pushing this agenda the whole time. And I just think Biden, he just assumes that everybody thinks like him. That's my concern. He thinks that, things are obvious to him, so they must be obvious to everybody. And it's just not like that. Also on the front of the New York Times, Biden's voting push crumbles as Sinema rejects filibuster change. Yes, Biden's campaign to push new voting rights preparations through Congress appeared all but dead on Thursday after it became clear that he had failed to unite his own party behind his drive to overhaul Senate rules to enact the legislation over Republican opposition. In an embarrassing setback for Mr. Biden, Senator Kyrsten Sinema, a Democrat of Arizona, stunned her colleagues just hours before the president was slated to make his case to them in person by taking the Senate floor to declare that she would not support undermining the filibuster to pass legislation under any circumstances. I mean, here's the thing about Kyrsten Sinema. She is elected to represent her people, and her people are crying out for voting rights reform. And the way she phrased her entire speech was that she, as an individual, could not vote for it. Because, fundamentally, she is a conservative who is working for Mitch McConnell on the sly. She's a secret operative. She's also in the pockets of big business. And I'm sure she's being paid handsomely to take this view. It's very interesting, isn't it, that we're basically in a world where one person can derail an entire civil rights movement. One person. And the Republicans are loving this. They're loving it. She's playing right into their hands. She's effectively doing their bidding for them. And so's Joe Manchin. It came 2 days after the president had put his reputation on the line to make the case for enacting the legislation by any means necessary, including scrapping the famed filibuster with a major speech in Atlanta that compared opponents of the voting rights measures to racist figures of the Civil War era and segregationists who thwarted civil rights initiatives in the 1960s. And it raises the question, what will Mr. Biden do next? Given that Republicans are all but certain to use a filibuster a fifth time to block the voting rights measures, and that Democrats lack the unanimous support needed in their party to change the rules to enable them to muscle the bills through themselves. I mean, they must have lawyers now, White House lawyers, working on every potential loophole to try to work out how they can get these things through, whether it's done by executive order or some other means. Because the day before yesterday, there was a sense of hope. Chuck Schumer had found this loophole for debating it, and Sinema just basically, she was like, I can imagine her with Mitch McConnell like texting, should I do it now? Should I do it now? Should I do it now? And it's like Biden's coming to the Senate to kind of push this thing home. And she's like, he's going to be here in 2 hours, And McConnell's like, do it, just do it. Do it already. Let's just do this. Let's just shut this thing down. And then she gets up and makes this speech that kills the voting rights passage, dead in its tracks. I mean, it was approved in the House of Representatives yesterday in Congress. But of course, it has to go to the Senate. She's a senator. Killed it. Dead. It's so offensive, isn't it? It's so offensive that one person, she can't, it's like, does she not see that there are like 100 million people that are behind this? Does she not see that? Does she not see people crying out? Does she not see the corruption that is being put in place at a state level by these Republican operatives? I mean, she's going to go down in history as the woman who derailed the entire voting rights reform of the pandemic era. It's going to be huge. And she's going to have to live with that. And all for what? For money. Just for money and power. It's a little bit like in England right now. Boris Johnson is on the cusp of a resignation because there's been so much evidence to suggest that he has lied his way through the pandemic. And Stacey, good morning. Isaiah, good morning. First time on Backchannel. Great to have you here. Isaiah's in Kentucky, so you've got Mitch McConnell to look after you and give you all the support and protection that you deserve. And, Boris Johnson, we have this thing in England still called shame, where the public, because it's a very small country, the public can shame a solitary politician and shame them through social media, shame them through protest. I mean, earlier today, there was like 80 people dressed as Boris Johnson in yellow wigs dancing in the street, protesting Boris out, Boris resign, Boris must go. And there's this video that I reposted yesterday of him dancing at this party. I mean, the whole thing's a disaster for him. And he's clinging on, but he is a disgraced politician, and a failed politician, and he's never been very good at it, ever. He's not a natural leader. Boris Johnson is like an accidental leader, He's just so ridiculous that people just think he's kind of funny, and they're just like, yeah, I mean, it's called identity politics, isn't it? When you have the politics of personality, where someone's personality is so charismatic that it's irrelevant that they're just a complete clown, because at least you can remember their name. But most politicians suffer from the fact that you can't even remember their name because they have absolutely nothing to offer outside of their politics. And these days, character is everything in this game. Carla, do you think Boris Johnson's going to last the week? Yeah, I do. Yeah, but this was about having a party on the eve of Prince Philip's funeral. Just another thing, yeah. Yeah. It just keeps happening, yeah. I mean, this is the problem with Boris Johnson, is nothing sticks to him. You know? Everything slides off. It's because he's sweating so much. I predicted last week on Twitter, I said, I guarantee that Boris Johnson will live to fight another general election. And I honestly think that, you know, as much as I would love him to resign, because I think he's a disaster of a human, I just think that he is... It's a bit like Donald Trump and the Republican Party. Like, who else is there? Yeah. It's the corruption. You know, there's so much innate corruption that he has been caught up in. But, you know, the British public, they sometimes pick on the weirdest things to get riled up about. And him being at a party is actually more of an issue for many of the British public than the fact that he has been setting up lucrative contracts for personal protective equipment with friends of his that have never done it before. You know, the British public do latch on to things sometimes that are quite different from the most serious of issues. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But because Boris Johnson doesn't suffer from that thing called shame, he doesn't feel shame, clearly. I tweeted this morning that he'll probably announce today that he's 3 months pregnant, and he'll probably give birth on Wednesday next week just to distract everybody from this drama. You know, he always seems to have another baby just when things go crazy. Yeah, Carla's saying it won't make a dent in his leadership, and I think she's right. Okay, so let's move on from the New York Times. And Stacey says, Anthony, I'm having hot dogs and chips and cookies. I do want to mention the sedition charge on the New York Times, because this is very interesting. This is Stuart Rhodes, the leader and founder of the far-right Oath Keepers militia, was arrested on Thursday and charged with 10 others with seditious conspiracy over what prosecutors said was their wide-ranging plot to storm the Capitol on January 6 last year and disrupt the certification of Joe Biden's electoral victory. The arrest of Mr. Rhodes was a major development in the sprawling investigation of the Capitol attack. He and the other Oath Keepers are the first charged with sedition among the more than 700 people accused for taking part in the assault. Mr. Rhodes was arrested shortly before 1 p.m. at his home in Granbury, Texas. The Justice Department has brought a variety of charges in connection with the Capitol attack and prosecuted 275 people for obstructing Congress's work. Yeah, the reason that this sedition charge is interesting and different for these militia is because there's evidence that they planned this, and they planned to do it in the event of Biden being certified as the president. You know, it was all planned, and there was evidence of their planning. Interesting. If you notice, the studio is getting more black, like the black hole is kind of going in. It's become more filled. I had my mum in here yesterday. I don't have any bright-coloured clothes. I just don't own them. I would have to go and buy a Backchannel yellow sweater and look like Timmy Mallet. Yeah, well, maybe I want to be a floating head. Maybe this is like a puppetry show, like black art. Maybe this is like it's like one of those Muppets sequences where the floating head sings the songs, like a skeleton head. Yeah, maybe Carla's right. Maybe I need to change my clothes, or I could just put the yellow back up again. I mean, this was quite a lot of work I've done back here. No, I'm not wearing white. Are you crazy? Are you crazy? Wear white? Need to differentiate. I also am going to get a little light back there as well. But I think we might get some green screen eventually. And then there'll be a whole backdrop back there of some kind of unicorns dancing and people doing somersaults and stuff. There'll be some real activity in the background rather than just void of darkness. I wonder if I can change the temperature of this light a little bit. Look, there we go. Is that better? Look, I'm a bit warmer now. A bit more warmth. It's not very good for my eyes, though. No, I knew I could do it, but I mean, I normally have it on the split one. Maybe we'll do that one. There you go. That's like the most natural one. You see? We got there in the end. And I could brighten that up as well. There we go. You see, now it's all happening. Now there's like light, camera, action. It's all happening for me. Okay, let's move on from this New York Times and see where we're going to end up now. The Journal News is next. Supreme Court halts vaccine rule. Justices allow mandate for most healthcare workers. A new phase for recycling. Orangetown program starts collection of food waste. Hopes pilot program will catch on across the county. Yes, this is the largest component of the municipal waste stream. An estimated 920 pounds of food scraps were collected last month for the program at the town's highway department facility. I mean, it's kind of crazy that they're just like getting round to this now. When the rest of the world has been separating food waste for ages. And then undocumented workers lobby for replenished relief benefits. That photograph was used on a different newspaper yesterday. That same picture. It says, every month nearly 100 people dial into a hotline inquiring about the Excluded Worker Fund, the state program targeting undocumented workers and others who couldn't get pandemic relief amid the pandemic. And this is that story about Diana Sanchez of the Catholic Charities Community Services, which we discussed yesterday. It's just the same story on a different newspaper. You see, the news cycle is kind of recycled, isn't it? Next, let's go to Pennsylvania, to Greensburg. Opportunities abound at Latrobe Job Fair. Wonderful. Biden's vaccine mandate blocked. Supreme Court upholds requirement for healthcare workers to get the shot. And a photograph of Olivia Jumper. She's 18, of Salem, president of the 4-H State Council, speaking on Saturday during the opening ceremonies of the 106th Pennsylvania Farm Show in Harrisburg. Yes, no masks there. No masks. The pandemic is effectively over in some states, isn't it? It's just over. I find it really interesting. And then a photograph of 11 Oath Keepers charged in January 6th riot, and a photograph of this he really is a proper terrifying-looking man, Stuart Rhodes. He looks like a baddie in a James Bond film. He's the founder and the leader of the far-right Oath Keepers militia group. And he was charged with seditious conspiracy. He's got an eye patch, like a proper criminal pirate. He's got an eye patch under his glasses. Also, insurers prepare to cover test kits. Highmark will begin reimbursing its customers for at-home COVID-19 tests this weekend and is looking to eliminate the need for customers to pay first. A vice president of the insurance company said on Thursday, under federal rules, Highmark and other private health insurers are required to cover up to 8 over-the-counter at-home COVID-19 tests per person per month, beginning on Saturday. So, this is all very well, but where do you get the COVID tests from? They don't exist. So there's all very well you're setting up to be reimbursed, but reimburse what? Can I get a refund of nothing, please? You literally cannot get them. They're nowhere to be found. I'm going to go to the store today and see if I can get some, but I fear I will return empty-handed. Pennsylvania now, in the Lebanon Daily News. The number one drug threat is the headline. Pennsylvania mum, the opioid crisis no longer exists. It's now the fentanyl crisis. I thought fentanyl was an opioid, but maybe I'm wrong. Excuse me. Oh, yeah, it's in the same drug family, it says. So this is a couple who lost their son in an overdose nearly 5 years ago, and they are campaigning now against fentanyl. A photograph of 2 men arrested for selling ghost guns. A 39-year-old Lebanon resident was part of a duo that was manufacturing and selling 28 ghost guns in the area. I mean, these ghost guns, they just look like real guns, you know? A ghost gun is like made up of various parts, you know, so you don't spot it being trafficked. It effectively is coming in component parts and someone puts them together. And then they avoid and evade the licensing and the guns shop and all this kind of stuff, you know. It's interesting. Samuel Snyder allegedly acquired firearm parts from between August and January for the purpose of manufacturing and commercially dealing privately made firearms. Officials said he made the firearms, more commonly called ghost guns, which did not possess serial numbers. He allegedly located potential firearm buyers and directed them to Snyder, who personally delivered the firearms in exchange for money. Yeah. So 2 people. Hector Colon, such a great name. I think I might rename myself Hector Colon, seeing as this guy's going into prison. The name's going to be available now, isn't it? Hector Colon calling. And Samuel Snyder. I mean, those names are like joke names you would write into a Batman episode. You know, Batman kind of meets his 2 arch nemesis rivals, Samuel Snyder and Hector Colon, in a Marvel comic. Anyway, this is real criminals have Batman criminal names, it seems. Also, Supreme Court halts vaccine mandate for businesses. I mean, this is my view on this is that I don't think that's a bad move. You know, the idea of mandating in the current climate with such a divisive country, I think is a mistake. I think education, having people go on TV all the time and reinforce this, I just don't feel like there's been enough push through from the Biden administration on the importance of vaccines. I mean, you could do what they used to do with cigarettes. Do you remember with the cigarette packets, they used to put pictures of dead people on them, you know, and show lungs that had been destroyed by nicotine. So why are we not seeing campaigns on posters and on TV ads of people who are on their deathbed with COVID-19, who are unvaccinated? Why are we not seeing explicit, specific advertising of showing you what the consequences are? I watched the final episode of The Morning Show last night. It's taken me like 10 weeks to get through 10 episodes. And of course, COVID-19 in the last 3 episodes becomes, you know, it's starting to, because they're doing it in like real time. And it's approaching January 2020 in the show. And it's brilliant the way it's handled. The Morning Show, I would say, is probably the single greatest piece of television that has been made in the last 2 decades. It is flawless. Flawless. If you're into that kind of thing. Obviously I am, because I've worked on morning shows. And so for me, it's a very interesting perspective. Billy Crudup, the actor who plays Corey Ellison in the show, he already got an Emmy for Best Actor last year. His acting is just on a whole new level. He really is such a wonderful actor. Just in his eyes and eyebrows. The guy is a genius, Billy Crudup. He's been around for years and kind of went completely unnoticed. And now in the morning show, he just like owns the whole show. Whenever he's on screen, it's electric. Love it. This is Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. It's the 14th of January, 2022, 9:35 here on the West Coast, 12:35 Eastern. And a reminder that we have a growing list of shows, including Haley and Allison Live, waking you up in the morning with lots of laughs and a 1-star cinema review, or Live Every Day with Liv Harrison, live from Texas, celebrating the little things in life with plenty of coffee. Or what about the charming and funny Hal Rudnick, whose program Your Pal Hal Rudnick directly follows this show at 11 a.m. or 2 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for your messages and for joining in. We have Isaiah, we have Stacy, we have Michael, we have Freddie and Nathan and Abigail. Thank you for being part of the show today. Hope you're good and enjoying the final day of the week. You know, this weekend for me is going to be very welcome. Although I do kind of work at the weekend, but I really am looking forward to this weekend. This is the last weekend that I have my family in town as well. They're all going back to England. And so tonight we're going to have what I've called the Last Supper. And when I sent the message round on the group thread, I actually put a photograph or picture of the Last Supper. Jesus doling out the snacks, the vegan snacks. And it's a little sad, but all good things have to come to an end. It's quite good timing, actually, because the UK have now removed the testing requirement to fly back into the UK. Did you know that? You don't have to test anymore if you're flying into the UK. They've lifted that restriction because they've just come to the conclusion that everyone's got Omicron. So you have to be vaccinated, but to fly. But if you're not vaccinated, you have to be tested. But so they don't have to get tests now, which is great, because being in America, they were going to have to pay for tests, because there are no free tests here if you're uninsured for stuff like that. I might fill in the little gaps here with some black spray. You see all these little gaps behind me? I think I might spray those in with a little something, just to really kind of close that off nicely. See the gaps, Carla? A little bit of spray. Bit of black spray. You're obsessed with my black t-shirt. Obsessed with it. Do you want me to go upstairs and get something else? I could wrap myself in a blanket. My little head is all you need to see. My body is really not for public consumption. My little head is all I'm giving away. Okay, let's see where else we're at next. The Meadville Tribune in Pennsylvania. Focus on innovation is the headline. Class, competition, emphasize creative problem solving. This is facing the intent gaze of 4 judges. Silas Lashbrook launched his team's presentation with an emotional appeal, describing the experience of parents whose newly delivered infant is immediately taken into a neonatal intensive care unit. Imagine instead of holding your child, you had to watch it be carried away in an isolette, unsure whether that child would live to see the next 5 minutes, being unable to breathe on their own. Well, I do know what that's like, because both my children went through that. Both my children, at birth, were taken away in an isolette to the NICU. And, you go through that, and it's like you go through it once and it's bad enough. But to have a second child to be whisked away with exactly the same lung deficiency and breathing problem, and you watch them breathing for your child they can't use, much equipment because the lungs are so small. They use the tiniest little pump to breathe air into the baby. And to see that and to watch that twice over, and then to have your kids in intensive care for both my children. My daughter was in intensive care for about 8 days, and my son was in intensive care for 7 days. 2 different hospitals, one in England, one in America. Exactly the same experience. It really is the most awful thing that parents go through. Lashbrook, a sophomore, told the panel of experts assembled at the Meadville Area Senior High School Library that is what parents in the NICU have to go through. Lashbrook's team are one of 3 from Jill Hyatt's innovation class that had the challenge of its own to confront on Thursday, pitching ideas for products designed to help parents and children who spend time in the NICU. The 4-person panel evaluating the pitches, more of a coaching staff than a Shark Tank, was made up of locals with relevant experience. Very interesting. So a 9th grade is a photo of a 9th grader demonstrating a prototype to the judge as others look on during the entrepreneurial competition on Thursday at the school. So interesting. Supreme Court halts vaccine rule for US businesses, also on the front of the Meadville Tribune. Connaught approves middle school sports programs. I do love these local stories. You know, they really celebrate the localness of these states and these counties. We don't really have this where I'm from anymore. You know, these little local newspapers have all but died. And, you know, for years they used to be delivered and nobody read them. They just went straight in the recycling. It's such a shame. The system for kind of gathering news now means that local stories are just not covered. They're just not covered. Yolanda, hello, good morning. Welcome to Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis, and this is what we do each weekday morning. We spend the morning together, you listening, me talking, and you interjecting with your messages. You can open your web browser and type in backchannel.tv, and then you can message me, and we can chat, you know, in the old-fashioned way. We're looking through the morning papers right now, zigzagging across the UK. Oh, they're talking about, where's this story about the 3G networks? Yes, phase out of 3G networks could affect 911 services in the Meadville Tribune. It says the phase out of 3G cellular phone networks and service this year may keep those with older cell phones from making or receiving calls and text messages, including reaching 911 emergency services. State and local officials urge those with older cell phones to contact their cell phone service provider now to determine if the device is compliant. The nation's 3 major wireless carriers, AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile, plan to shut down their 3G networks as early as February. The wireless carriers are moving to 5G, or 5th generation networks. But hang on a second, I thought that 2G worked all the time anyway. I thought that 2G was like the standard. You know, I thought that 2G was just going to be there, whatever. You know, that was like the base standard. And then 3G obviously used to make things a bit faster. 4G and LTE is, I mean, I don't have a 5G phone, but I have a very fast 4G or an LTE phone. So, I mean, I'm not unhappy with the speed, but I don't know. I don't really subscribe to the craziness of the conspiracy theories surrounding 5G. Kevin, good morning. Where have you been? Nice to see you. Thank you very much for joining us. You know, on the Echo Show device, there is actually a camera. I mean, I keep mine closed. But it would be really interesting if as you join, we don't have this technology, but if you joined, I could see you as well as you could see me. That would be really cool. But we can't do that for obvious reasons. And there is a little slider to close the camera on your Echo Show. Anthony, I got a new mobile phone, says Stacy. Really? That's exciting. Who doesn't love a new mobile phone? It's weird with me because I'm a real Apple fanboy, and yet there isn't an Apple phone that I want. I mean, I have an old Apple phone, that I use. But like, I have like an iPhone 8, same as you, Carla. We have the same phone. But the new ones, I'm not into. I don't know why. I just don't like the notch. She said my father bought it for me, so that way I didn't have to do much in the way of bills or anything. That's good. Well done, Stacey. The York Daily Record this morning for this Friday leads with nation's first ever hemp eggs. This is fascinating. The nation's first ever hemp-fed cage-free egg. Produced on the company's 3,000-acre farm, the cage-free eggs are a product of chickens hand-fed a specially formulated and laboratory-tested all-vegetarian diet consisting of 20% hemp seed meal. The Sheik's Creek brand pays homage to a creek in Lancaster County, which played as one of the leading producers of hemp in the United States. They say the company began brainstorming the concept back in 2016. Hemp agriculture runs deep in the Lancaster County heritage. This is very interesting. They look just like regular eggs, but with a slightly darker yolk. Oh, this is from Pennsylvania. Yeah, the York Daily Record from Pennsylvania. Cage-free hemp eggs. I mean, I would buy those. I wonder how much they are, though, because, I mean, I've really noticed this. You know, if you go to a budget supermarket, you can really buy like a dozen eggs. You can buy like 12 eggs for $2. But you can also buy a dozen eggs for $7 in Gelson's. So it's like, you know, which do you go for? Hemp eggs will be available at giant grocery stores, as well as numerous independent grocery stores in central Pennsylvania, such as Shady Maple Markets and Oregon Dairy in Lititz. That's exciting, isn't it? A whole new egg. And also on the front of the York Daily Record this morning, American Red Cross has severe blood shortage. It says they're facing their worst blood shortage in more than a decade and forcing doctors to make difficult decisions about who receives blood transfusions and who will need to wait until more products become available. In recent weeks, the Red Cross has less than a one-day supply of critical blood types and has had to limit blood product distributions to hospitals, according to a news release. At times, as much as 1/4 of hospital blood needs are not being met. This is because of the pandemic, of course, people just not going out and giving blood. And there's also a warning a significant winter storm could hit central Pennsylvania. Meteorologists are keeping an eye on a storm, a potential northeaster that could bring all snow or a wintry mix to central Pennsylvania over the holiday weekend. Interesting. I might get a Sharpie and just extend the trajectory of that storm, push it a little further, you know? I now want eggs, like now I'm hungry, you know? Stacey says I have a Galaxy A12 and I want to go for the $2 eggs. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, you know, these hemp eggs are going to be expensive. It doesn't say how much they're going to be here. They're THC-free. Consuming them will not get you high. Well, what's the point, then, if you're not going to get high from the eggs? That was the whole reason I got excited. They're filled with nutrients, including omega-3, vitamin D, vitamin B12, a source of vitamin B2, vitamin B5, vitamin E, biotin, choline, and selenium. I don't even eat eggs. What am I talking about? I'm vegan. Completely forgot for a minute just then. Occasionally I have an egg, like once in a blue moon, you know, like maybe once every 6 months or something. Do you know what I use to replace eggs when I'm making pancakes? I make gluten-free pancakes. Do you know what I replace the egg with? Do you know what my magic ingredient is? It's a very big staple in the US. People love it. They eat it on their own. On its own, I should say. No idea? No? Anyone? Anyone? I'll tell you. Applesauce. I use applesauce as the binding agent when I do pancakes. So you don't need an egg at all. If you're baking, You really don't need an egg. You can use applesauce. Does the same thing. The advantage is that you have a very slight appley taste to your pancakes. Everyone is different. This is true. Abigail, hello, in Oklahoma. Lovely. So should we talk about human trafficking? Because I feel like we've spent enough time on the strawberry shortcake right now. It's 10 minutes to 10 here on the West Coast, 10 minutes to 1 Eastern. And thank you for joining Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. Am I sitting like back in the darkness now? Or is it still bright enough? Still bright enough, I guess. It's such a good microphone, this, isn't it? It really is. It really does the work. It really does the work. Although I'm tempted to go back to the old one, but I do like this one. It's so huge and heavy. That's true, it is the stand. The mic's pretty heavy as well. It's like a defensive weapon, this thing. So let's talk about this human trafficking story, because it's a very major subject, and it's something that I think people don't really correlate the idea of like modern slavery and human trafficking being together. And I also correlate people who are incarcerated with being with modern slavery as well. So we could talk a little bit about that. Human trafficking crimes represent an increasingly important and fast-developing aspect of local police work, as agencies battle an array of often well-funded trafficking operations. Human trafficking, as defined by Homeland Security, involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some kind of labor or commercial sex act. Human traffickers are difficult for law enforcement to spot because traffickers use violence, manipulation, false promises of well-paying jobs, or romantic relationships to lure victims into trafficking situations. So this is a new institute that we're going to talk about that I need to give you some detail of, because it's called the Mel Green Institute to Combat Human Trafficking. And we mentioned it this morning in the Hernando Sun, and how the organizer of this, Mel Green, he passed away in 2020 at the age of 92 after a life spent helping others in his adopted state of Florida. Friends and associates of Mr. Green decided steering grant resources to the new institute would be a fitting way to pay tribute and carry on Green's legacy. His son, Danny Green of Indian Trail, North Carolina, had this to say about the institute being named for his father. He said, "My dad joined a Rotary Club some 50 years ago, and it was life-changing for him and our family. Combined with the Jewish practice of Tikkun Olam, which means repair the world, he was always active in countless community projects to help improve the quality of life for so many. Everyone would call Mel when they needed to get a project organized, as his passion and leadership were admirable. Throughout my life, he always reminded me of service above self and the importance of giving back. He truly had a heart for the hurting. Before passing, human trafficking was so disturbing to my dad that at 92 years old, he got the process in motion to fight this horrible modern-day slavery. I'm honored and thrilled to see the Mel Green Institute to Combat Human Trafficking at St. Leo. In life, he inspired many, and his legacy lives on." Well, St. Leo University Assistant Professor Karen May currently directs the university's involvement with the Institute and related public affairs programs. Human trafficking has continued to be a horrible crime that is present within Florida as well as within national and international borders, said May, who worked in law enforcement for the protection of children and the elderly from abuse before joining the academic world. Human trafficking crimes represent an increasingly important and fast-developing aspect of local police work as agencies battle an array of often well-funded trafficking operations. Human trafficking, as defined by Homeland Security, involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some kind of labor or commercial sex act. It's very interesting, isn't it? Very interesting that this is like going on outside of society. It's like there's a whole underworld that we know very little about. This whole criminal fraternity operating, making their money through illicit means. They say human traffickers are difficult for law enforcement to spot because traffickers use violence, manipulation, false promises of well-paying jobs, or romantic relationships to lure victims into trafficking situations. May says the Institute will focus on 3 counties, including Hernando, Pasco, and Citrus, to raise and maintain awareness of the dangers and the means that criminals use to trap children and adults. So I do feel like, there really needs to be almost like more coverage of this. The US Department of State, they have on the state website, they have a whole page about human trafficking. They say it's also called modern slavery or trafficking in persons. Has no place in our world, says the State Department, as both a grave crime and a human rights abuse. It compromises national and economic security, undermines the rule of law, and harms the well-being of individuals and communities everywhere. It's a crime of exploitation. Traffickers profit at the expense of their victims by compelling them to perform labor or to engage in commercial sex in every region of the United States and around the world, with an estimated 24.9 million victims worldwide at any given time. Wow. These numbers are crazy, aren't they? Human traffickers prey on adults and children of all ages, backgrounds, and nationalities, exploiting them for their own profit. And this is the thing, I guess, isn't it? That we forget that some people are so desperate. And invariably, human trafficking is taking people from the poorest nations, and you give them the hope of living in a free, modern society. But in return, they have to work. And the work invariably means the sex trade. It says in the United States, traffickers compel victims to engage in commercial sex and to work in both legal and illicit industries and sectors, including hospitality, traveling sales crews, agriculture, janitorial services, construction, landscaping, restaurants, factories, care for persons with disabilities, salon services, massage parlors, retail services, fairs, carnivals, peddling, begging, drug smuggling, distribution, religious institutions, childcare, and domestic work. I mean, this is really the reality of people who are trafficked living amongst us, and we might not even realize what their fate is and has been. The term forced labor is defined in 2 separate sections of the US Code in the criminal statutes of Title 18. It encompasses the range of activities recruiting, harboring, transporting, providing, or obtaining involved when a person uses force or physical threats, psychological coercion, abuse of the legal process, a scheme, a plan, a pattern intended to hold a person in fear of serious harm or other coercive means to compel someone to work. And once a person's labor is obtained by such means, other person's previous consent or effort to obtain employment with the trafficker does not preclude the person from being considered a victim or the government from prosecuting the offender. In the customs-related statute of Title 19, it's also defined in connection with the prohibition of the importation of goods produced wholly or in part by forced labor, including forced child labor, convict labor, and indentured labor under penal sanctions. I mean, some of the descriptions of these things are just terrifying. We're not even yet talking about the people, the individuals, the actual humans behind these stories. Here, we're literally just talking about the legal terms, and already it sounds completely terrifying when you refer to this. Domestic servitude and forced child labor and debt bondage. These things are used as blackmail, emotional blackmail, employment blackmail. And it's tragic. So the 3P paradigm, prosecution, protection and prevention, continues to serve as the fundamental framework used around the world to combat human trafficking. The United States also follows this approach, reflected in the US Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. In addition, a fourth P for partnership serves as a complementary means to achieve progress across the 3Ps and enlist all segments of society in the fight against modern slavery. So are you even aware of human trafficking or modern slavery? If it's on all of our doorsteps, are you even aware of it? Is it something that you think about? Are you passionate about? Do you ever discuss it with people? Because my concern is that it's one of those crimes that is it's just so not obvious that doesn't appear in people's psyche on a regular basis, even though they're probably coming into contact with people who have been on the receiving end of trafficking. Should we do our US news update now and find out what's happening across the rest of the country? Because there's lots going on today, obviously, with yesterday's news about Kirsten Sinema, and we've got Joe Biden losing his vaccine mandate in the Supreme Court, got the arrest of these militia and them being done for one of the most serious crimes to be reported.
It's Thursday, January.
So the US News Update is the daily podcast that I make. You can download it wherever you get your podcasts. Let's have a little listen to it now.
It's Friday, January 14. From the Volley Network, this is your daily US News Update. I'm Anthony Davis. US prosecutors on Thursday charged the founder of the far-right Oath Keepers militia, Stuart Rhodes, and 10 alleged members of the group with seditious conspiracy for their role in the deadly January 6 attack on the Capitol. They said Rhodes had warned his group to prepare for a bloody and desperate fight in the days leading up to the assault, when supporters of then-President Trump tried to stop Congress from certifying his election defeat. This is the first time alleged participants in the attack have been charged with seditious conspiracy, which is defined as attempting to overthrow, put down, or destroy by force the government of the United States. "We're going to have a fight," prosecutors said. Rhodes told his allies on the messaging app Signal. The Oath Keepers are a loosely organized group of activists who believe the federal government is encroaching on their rights and focus on recruiting current and former police, emergency services, and military members. 9 of the 11 charged with seditious conspiracy were already facing other charges relating to the Capitol attack. Members of the far-right Proud Boys and 3%ers have also been charged with taking part in the attack. Meanwhile, the US Supreme Court on Thursday blocked President Joe Biden's COVID-19 vaccination or testing mandate for large businesses, a policy the conservative justices deemed an improper imposition on the lives and health of many Americans, while endorsing a separate federal vaccine requirement for healthcare facilities. Your daily US News Update is part of the Volley Network. To hear my live daily morning show, ask your Amazon Echo device to open Backchannel.
There it is. Sorry about the fact that it's a little staccato, but, there's kinks in the system. We'll work it out one day. It's only been doing that for like 2 months. It's the 14th of January. This is Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Anthony Davis Show. And we've been discussing human trafficking, just trying to learn a little bit more about what it is and why we should probably be thinking about it a little more. Because, this is something that is around us every day. And I was asking if it's something that you even consider. Do you converse with people, talk about it? So that's modern slavery here in the United Kingdom, in the United States, I mean. I haven't been in the United Kingdom for years. What am I talking about? And then we need to take a look at the Joe Biden's vaccine mandate, which you just heard mentioned in the US News Update, because he, effectively lost this case here in the Supreme Court only yesterday, requiring workers at large companies to be vaccinated or tested weekly. The justices at the nation's highest court said the mandate exceeded the Biden administration's authority. Well, separately, they ruled that a more limited vaccine mandate could stand for staff at government-funded healthcare facilities. The administration said the mandates would help fight the pandemic. Joe Biden, whose approval ratings have been sagging, typically, he is expressed disappointment with the decision to block what he says common sense life-saving requirements for employees. He said, I call on business leaders to immediately join those who've already stepped up, including 1/3 of Fortune 100 companies, and institute vaccination requirements to protect their workers. Well, I mean, this is the thing that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because it's only the mandate from the federal government that's been prevented. Because, of course, private companies, which this was aimed at, were already able to impose their own vaccine mandate on their employees. And there was a big story about Nike today. Nike has imposed a vaccine mandate on their employees. And I think they fired 15 people, or maybe it was more than 15 people today, who were refusing to get vaccinated. Former President Trump cheered the court's decision. He said vaccine mandates would have further destroyed the economy. He said, we're proud of the Supreme Court for not backing down. No mandates. I mean, he'll just say anything. You can tell now, because, of course, last week when he was being interviewed and he was talking about how everybody should go and get vaccinated, and now he's like, no mandates. I mean, what's the difference? Saying everyone go get vaccinated, and in the other breath saying no mandates. I mean, what's the difference between those two, Mr. Trump? They mean the same thing. It would have required for workers to receive the COVID-19 shot or be masked and tested at their own expense every week. It would have applied to workplaces with at least 100 employees and affected 84 million workers. It was designed to be enforced by employers. Opponents, including several Republican states and some business groups, said the administration was overstepping its power with requirements which were introduced in November and immediately drew legal challenges. I mean, look, I also want to talk about, do you know about the Viagra story that just broke just now? Oh, this is very interesting. So you know that the right-wing media are constantly looking for alternative therapies to claim that works on COVID-19. So the latest one is Viagra. They've been saying if you take Viagra, you won't get COVID. And so a story is literally just broken a few moments ago about this, suggesting that this is not actually true. It's like, surprise, 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 surprise. Don't take Viagra. Just get vaccinated, Just get vaccinated. It's just relentless, like coming up with all these various drugs that they think will work, ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, and all of these, things, horse dewormer and an anti-parasitic drug. I mean, none of these things work. You don't have a parasite in you, you have a virus. And of course, in the last week, they've been talking about Viagra and saying, so I guess all these Republicans now who are anti-vaxxers also are going to start taking Viagra. Does it work on women as well? Does the Viagra work? Does it stop you getting COVID if you're female? Because, Viagra, you've got to remember, they discovered what Viagra was capable of by accident when they were researching heart medication. Because What Viagra actually does is it lowers your blood pressure. And that's why people who have already low blood pressure, shouldn't take Viagra, because it could lower their blood pressure too much. So it's a blood pressure reducing drug that, it turned out, also allows the free flow of blood, and that's what enables the Viagra result. I'm trying to be very careful with my language here. Anyway, it's just broken that they are. It's become like an official thing now. The CDC or someone is saying, please do not take Viagra for COVID. I mean, it's just so sad, isn't it, that we are having to chase these conspiracy theories. This is what the CDC are having to devote their time to, is chasing conspiracy theories to try and stop people from self-medicating with inappropriate drugs. If it's not drinking bleach, it's taking Viagra. It's just a joke. I mean, are we living in a joke country where people just have no intellect and are prepared to follow whatever anybody says, non-medical people? It's so annoying to me. And Rand Paul is a very good example of this. Rand Paul is probably one of the worst humans in American politics. And he is the one who has this campaign against Dr. Fauci to get Fauci fired, and he's trying to raise money on his own website for it, and has put out all of these conspiracy theories about Fauci being anything other than being a great human. Fauci is probably going to get the Presidential Medal of Freedom. I wouldn't be surprised. Do you know how much Dr. Fauci gets paid? Do you know what his salary is? I found out the other day. Any idea? He gets around $450,000 a year. $450,000. It might be nearer 480,000 actually. Worth every penny? I'd say. Well, there's a little update. I do want to carry on talking about the vaccine mandate, but I also just saw this. Story about the pig heart transplant. This is a little update because I would be very interested in this. This is the man that got a pig heart transplant. It said the Maryland hospital is defending its decision to transplant a pig's heart into a dying man following reports that the patient had a criminal past, saying his eligibility was based solely on his medical records. Oh my goodness. So offensive. 57-year-old David Bennett still recovering from last week's highly experimental transplant, a medical first and a step in the quest to one day ease shortages of human organs by using animal organs. While the new heart is functioning, it's too soon to know how Bennett will fare. On Thursday, the Washington Post reported 34 years ago, Bennett was charged with a stabbing that left a young man paralyzed. The state's Division of Corrections told the newspaper that Bennett was released from prison in 1994 after serving 6 of a 10-year prison sentence. In a statement on Thursday, the University of Maryland Medical Center said doctors are obligated to provide the best care for every patient, regardless of their background. Yeah, quite right. How did this even become an issue? This patient came to us in dire need, and a decision was made about his transplant eligibility based solely on his medical records. The patient made the extraordinary decision to undergo this groundbreaking surgery to not only potentially extend his own life, but also for the future benefit of others. Bennett's son issued a separate statement declining to discuss further his father's past and saying he hoped to focus on my father's wish to contribute to the science and potentially to save patient lives in the future. I mean, there is an attitude, and I've learned this about American culture, which I just certainly didn't feel growing up in England, where people feel like that if you have done something bad, a bad thing in your past, that kind of voids you. That you are, it's a little bit like the attitude to the homeless as being their fault. Like anybody who's a criminal is also therefore loses all of their rights. And I find this very interesting because it's in my experience of moving around the world and traveling and living in different places, it seems kind of exclusive to America, the idea that, just because somebody committed a crime, went to prison, served their time and came out, they shouldn't be entitled to medical care.
I mean, where does that attitude come from? Why are there some people that feel like that? Why are there some people that feel like drug addicts have themselves to blame? I mean, I hear that all the time. Well, you know, they're drug addicts. They've only got themselves to blame. It's like, you know, every decision we make is based on circumstance. Every decision that we make is based on our past and our history and our upbringing and our you know, issues surrounding who we are, fundamentally who we are. And I just don't really buy into this notion that if you have failed in some way to be an upstanding, perfect member of society, that you therefore lose your rights in future. You know, can people not repent? Can people not seek to change? Do people not have the opportunity to redeem themselves in some way? I mean, you could argue that this guy is redeeming himself by having a pig's heart put inside him. I mean, if that isn't repentance, then what is? He's undergoing an experimental surgery. He should have done this instead of going to prison for 6 years. He's got a pig's heart inside him. This is my point. It's like we really... Why do we judge people so much? Why do we do that? Interesting to me. I'd like to know who has brought this argument to the Maryland hospital. You know? Who has done that? Has somebody uncovered Mr. Bennett's past and been like, you know, started like waving it around? He was a bad person. He went to prison. I mean, like, what? Who would even bring this up? Who posted the reports that the patient had a criminal past? Who said that? Who would even go looking for that information? Beggars belief, really, isn't it? Anyway, let's go back to the vaccine mandates because, you know, I want to cheer you up with a really positive subject. The administration's workplace vaccine mandate would have required workers to receive a COVID-19 shot or be tested weekly. Opponents, including several Republican states and some business groups, said the administration was overstepping its power with the requirements which were introduced in November and immediately drew legal challenges. So, do you agree with this? I mean, are you somebody that is refusing to get vaccinated, not because you don't want to be protected from COVID, because you just don't want to be told to go and get vaccinated? Because I really think that that's like a thing now, isn't it? People who just don't like the idea of being told what to do. I mean, why be told what to do by the authorities, you know? Maybe because it's important, you know? Maybe because it's something that is going to help the collective community. Maybe it's something that is going to be beneficial to the wider population and to the rest of the world. I mean, just small things, you know. Small things. Okay, where are we at now? Let's check on your messages to see what people are saying here, because, you know, there's always people joining in. Isaiah, thank you for being with us. He's testing out the equipment, saying hi. James and Abigail, welcome. Kevin, Yolanda, Stacy, Michael. Nice to know that we're all hanging out on Backchannel today on this Friday.
I'm going to go and do a little shopping after this today. I'm going to go down to Trader Joe and stock up on vegetables. My go-to recipe these days is you just buy a whole bunch of vegetables and you cover them in a little oil and a little salt and pepper and you just roast them and you eat them. That's my go-to. I didn't eat vegetables before. This is like a whole new thing. No, I mean, I did eat vegetables, but there was always I would always think in terms of the protein. You know, I'd always be like, what protein do I want? And then I would add the vegetables. But now I think in terms of vegetables. And also, you know, I had this conversation with my brother this morning because I'm cooking the vegetables for the whole family later. And he was like, what about the vegans? What are the vegans going to have? And I said, the vegetables. And my brother doesn't think in terms of veganism, and he just thinks that vegans will be disappointed with just vegetables. And I'm like, trust me, that's all we eat. I'm going to do Brussels sprouts. I'm going to do some sweet potatoes and garlic, and it's going to be delicious. There's so much natural flavor in these things. But do you know what the secret ingredient is that you add to all this? Is a little mustard. I'm telling you. You get a high-quality mustard, and it just gives all of this the most delicious, you know, it just changes everything for me, in my view. I'll be honest, Carla. I honestly, having spent a lifetime cooking and inquiring in other people's habits, that people don't eat vegetables. You do. I mean, you're Irish, so vegetables are a very big part of your heritage, right? Especially potatoes, I'm told. But I believe that people don't eat vegetables. And in fact, there's a lot of science to suggest and data to suggest that whole government 5 a day thing. Do you know what the real number is out of that 5 a day? Look up the UK 5 a day and tell me how many people have any more than 1 or 2 a day. People do not eat vegetables. They just don't. They have no idea. Yeah, that's true. Well, I don't really hang out with anybody anymore, but I mean, I remember this from living in London. I would be surprised at the number of people who would never consider cooking vegetables as a meal, you know, of bringing multiple vegetables to the table. And, you know, I just think that fruit and vegetables are things that people think that they have to eat rather than they want to eat. They'll eat a sausage roll from Greg's, as we discussed the other day. But, you know, the number of people that are satisfying the government's advice, the recommended advice on how many vegetables you eat, it's minimal. In the UK, it's minimal. They're just not doing it. I would like you to look it up. I would really like you to look up to see how many, you know, through surveys, how many people are eating anything close to 5 a day. And the crazy thing is, 5 a day includes fruit or veg, doesn't it? Am I right? I think it's like a combination of both. People are doing 1 or 2. I'm telling you, they're doing 1 or 2. We really are struggling. And in America, I'm sure it's even worse. Let me have a little look here. I'll do the US one. You do the UK one. Percentage of Americans eating vegetables. Okay, here's the story from WebMD. This was published in February. Nearly all US adults get some vegetables every day, but the old apple a day adage is falling out of favor, a new government survey suggests. Research found that a full 95% of US adults said they ate some amount of vegetables in any given day. On the other hand, only about 2/3 said the same of fruit, down significantly from 20 years ago. Experts called the finding on vegetables an encouraging sign and a bit of a surprise. But the survey looked only at any consumption of produce and not whether Americans were eating recommended amounts each day. The federal government's dietary guidelines for Americans call adults to eat about 2 to 3 cups of vegetables per day. And research shows that 90% of Americans do not meet that goal. Isaiah says, I used to be vegan, but I quit because I like meat. It's all about McDonald's. Survey respondents noted their consumption of starchy vegetables, including potatoes, but not whether they were the salty fast food variety. Right? There were, however, disparities by income, with poorer Americans eating fewer fruits, leafy greens, and red and orange vegetables. It's a long-standing trend. Low and high-income people were comparable only when it came to starchy vegetables and fruit juice. Overall, about 31% of Americans say they consumed 100% fruit juice on any given day. Fruit juice does count towards the recommended daily allotment, which is 1 to 2 cups of fruit per day. You see, I don't even think people realize what vegetables are. I think they think that if they eat French fries from McDonald's, that constitutes a vegetable, and I'm not convinced that it does. You know, I'm talking about eating fresh vegetables without all the maize and starch and all of this stuff. Well, yeah, because places like McDonald's are seeking out locations to place their restaurants in where they know that they're going to get the most people, you know? But what's interesting is the way that the vegetable is cooked is going to suggest how much of the vitamins and the positive aspects of the vegetable remain in place, you know? I just think that I just know what the American diet is. I've been living here for long enough, and I just don't see fruit and vegetables in average person's diet, regular people's diet, in the same way. You know, it's very interesting. The CDC reports, this came out in 2017, just 1 in 10 adults meets the federal fruit or vegetable recommendation. It says... in 2015, just 9% of adults met the intake recommendation for vegetables, ranging from 6% in West Virginia to 12% in Alaska. Only 12% of adults met the recommendations for fruit, ranging from 7% in West Virginia to 16% in Washington, D.C. I mean, we talked about this the other week, didn't we? When we were talking about food poverty in these, what was the name given to certain places? We were looking at West Virginia as an example. They were food deserts. That's right, food deserts. And it was where you literally cannot get fresh produce because it's all being exported. And the only produce you can get is fast food. And so people think that getting, you know, French fries is a vegetable. And, you know, yeah, I think it's the availability. Yeah, we're not blaming individuals. We're blaming the fact that retailers are taking advantage of the fact that certain social groups are less likely to eat certain types of food. The CDC says the report highlights that very few Americans eat the recommended amounts of fruits and vegetables every day, putting them at risk of chronic diseases like diabetes and heart disease. As a result, we're missing out on the essential vitamins, minerals, and fiber that fruits and vegetables provide. 7 of the top 10 leading causes of death in the United States are from chronic diseases. Eating a diet rich in fruit and vegetables daily can help reduce the risk of many leading causes of illness and death, including heart disease, type 2 diabetes, some cancers, and obesity. So the CDC suggests 10 strategies to increase access to fruit and veg, including start or expand farm-to-institution programs in childcare, schools, hospitals, workplaces, and other institutions. Improve access to retail stores and markets that sell high-quality fruits and vegetables. And ensure access to fruits and vegetables in cafeterias and other food service venues in work sites, hospitals, and universities. I think I told you a few weeks ago I took my daughter to a birthday party. And it was in American Girl, this shop where all of the dolls are made in China. And they have this little restaurant at the top. And the kids came in to sit down and eat. And on every table was a plate of 4 Cinnabons. Sugar buns covered in sugary icing and cinnamon. And these were on the table when they arrived. So they got to choose what they wanted to eat off of a menu, which was going to be, just like chicken dippers, deep-fried chicken dippers and French fries, not high-quality food. But the kids had already eaten. The kids were so hungry. Like, you need to feed kids straight away. If you're having a party at lunchtime, feed the kids straight away. It took 2 hours for the kids to get fed, for the food to come out. And all these kids were high as kites. Well, my children drink water at parties. They just do. I mean, I don't allow my kids to have fizzy pop. So my kids drink water all the time. They love it. And they have milk. But I mean, what other drinks do you give children? Apple juice? Orange juice? No pop. No pop. You can't let children do that. So what I do now is if I get an invitation to a kid's party, and I did this last week, I take my kids out for lunch first, so that when they get to the party, they're not hungry. Because I do not want to rely on a party and other parents deciding what my kids eat for lunch, because it's not going to be good enough. My kids don't like to eat pretzels and little kind of snacky snacks. I like to feed them. So we went out for lunch last weekend before we went to a party, and it worked out great. And there wasn't really any proper food at the party, but there was delicious cupcakes, and so they had half a cupcake each. They couldn't eat a whole cupcake because they were full up from lunch. It was genius. I've totally got this down now. Should we look at this new conversation about the VW? Because I think it's a very interesting subject. This is green tech. This is Volkswagen, who are trying its best to compete with Tesla. They've nearly doubled the number of electric cars they produced last year compared to 2020, delivering almost 432,000 to its customers, the German carmaker said on Wednesday. Tesla, meanwhile, sold over 936,000 vehicles. The Volkswagen Group mentioned supply chain issues that led to shortages of computer chips and other parts as an obstacle to progress, describing the conditions as extraordinarily challenging. I mean, this is interesting, isn't it? Now, isn't it funny that we're in this climate crisis? We're desperate to get people to stop driving gas cars and move to electric cars. But we also have a supply chain problem because of the pandemic, so we can't actually make the cars to get people to switch. It's a problem within a problem within a problem. Are we doing our chat with Hal today, by the way? I'm not sure. Is today a day for that? Yeah, but it didn't happen yesterday, did it? So we could do it today instead. I'd be down for that. It says the company which owns brands including Audi, Porsche and Skoda. Isn't that crazy that Volkswagen own Audi, Porsche and Skoda? They pledged last month to spend half its budget, a little more than $100 billion, on electric vehicles in the next 5 years to challenge Tesla. The ID.4, which is the new car, the new electric car, and I've seen it around, and it's a nice-looking car. I mean, it doesn't, they haven't gone crazy with it, because obviously some electric cars look really modern, very kind of over-designed. But the ID.4 there's something quite subtle about it. I really don't feel like it's too much of a departure from traditional vehicles. Tesla boosted its delivery last year by roughly 436,000. This is amazing that Tesla is just like absolutely delivering these cars at levels that you've never seen before. Here in California, I counted, it's pretty much every fifth vehicle is a Tesla. Every fifth vehicle. So yes, VW has begun rolling out a series of new models, including the ID.4 electric SUV, but progress last year was hampered by supply chain issues. They said 2021 was challenging due to global semiconductor shortages, but we nevertheless consistently implemented our clear future course. The doubling of our battery electric volumes and the high demand for all our vehicles clearly show that we're on the right track. Tesla had its own chip shortage issues during the year, but was able to manage them. Elon Musk's company posted record deliveries in the final 3 months of 2021. My brother's just ordered a Tesla, and the reason he did that is because he currently leases a combustion engine car, and he feels obliged to get an electric car. And he looked out all the electric cars from all the manufacturers, and Tesla was one of the cheapest. And that was Elon Musk's desire, wasn't it? That, the Model 3 and the Model Y are the cheaper cars. The Model 3 costs $39,000, which for an electric car is amazing. I think the price recently went up to about 42 or 43 because they decided to include autopilot as standard. Tesla has forecast that with new factories near Austin, Texas, and Berlin starting full-scale production this year, it should have annual global sales growth of 50% or better for at least the next few years. They say while there aren't many competitors in the EV space, Tesla continues to dominate market share, as evidenced again this quarter while battling through the chip shortage. I'm excited about the Cybertruck, and also the Ford have got a truck, haven't they? An electric truck now. And another company announced an electric truck the other day because, this is the only way you're going to get Americans to kind of switch, is to give them something sexier that is in big truck form. My neighbor's girlfriend just arrived and she's literally driving a monster truck. She's from Oklahoma, drove down, and I was like, wow. Because, I am quite prejudiced against large gas-guzzling vehicles. My personal view is that if you're driving something that's that big and is using that much gas, then you are not environmentally conscious, and I can't be friends with you. And I'm very judgmental. Yeah, but I'm talking about emissions. I just think that we are responsible for so many emissions, and I don't use the air conditioning. Well, maybe she doesn't drive a lot. I don't know. But the point is that I think it's about making your case and your statement. So if you can't afford an electric car, then get a small car. You're right. Carla, you're right. You're right. I know you're right. You're right. I probably have a larger carbon footprint than she does. Even though my vehicle does not emit any emissions, and I don't use AC, and I only buy used products, I don't buy new products. I try and do my bit, but I think that these days the symbolism of what car you drive has really come to... Because you've got to remember, she's been in Oklahoma. and her boyfriend drives a huge Mercedes. Both of them are gas. No, she doesn't have children. And I have 2 children, which means that my carbon footprint is greater. I've made more carbon by the nature of having kids. It's a very good point. But what about I don't know. I mean, it's a very meta conversation. You know, so many people are choosing not to have children for environmental reasons, financial reasons, but also, you know, what kind of world do you want to bring kids into these days? You know, look at the state of the world. Look at the state of the planet. Do children really deserve to grow up in this kind of environment? But at the same time, we do ideally want to keep the human race evolving, don't we? You know, it would be nice if humans stuck around for a while, so we've got to have some kids. And people are having fewer children than ever before. So I don't want to kind of say that I am responsible because I have children for, you know, affecting the planet in that way, even though my kids' methane emissions are pretty high. But the car has become symbolic of our attitude towards global warming, right? The car we drive is symbolic about how we feel about emissions. And Carla's argument, which is a perfectly valid one, is that they may be offsetting their emissions in other ways. I totally get that. But well, how else do you get to Glasgow other than on an aeroplane? I mean, you know, this is the thing. Greta Thunberg's got the time to go on a boat. There's a lot of layers to this conversation. I agree. And I don't really, you know, I mean, my other neighbour said to me, because when they saw the monster truck parked outside, my other neighbour, because I'd lectured the other neighbour on emissions, and they said, why don't you go lecture them on environment? I am a very contradictory person. But I do think that if you choose to drive, there are ways of doing it. And if you... And what I find offensive is this huge truck. It's huge. For one person to drive. You know, when I drove in London, I had a smart car. You know, before electric cars were available, I had a smart car. It did like 80 miles to the gallon. Tiny little thing with 2 seats. Well, they do travel a lot, these two. So I do know that. They do travel. So, you know, they have been on aeroplanes. It's not like they've never left the country. I mean, I would never lecture people about veganism in the same way that I never wanted to be lectured about veganism. But I do advocate for vegetables now, which I never used to do. And I did have some fish last night, little mahi-mahi. But that's vegan, isn't it? You know, it's completely fine. But the electric car conversation it's such a big one, you know, because we're talking about, you know, we're seeking to change people's minds and attitude towards vehicles. And I genuinely think, certainly here in Los Angeles, that if you have the means to get a car, whether it be leasing a car, buying a car, or, you know, whatever, getting a loan on a car, if you are choosing a gas car now, after everything that we know about emissions, if you are choosing to buy a gas car, then I think that's a mistake. And I don't buy the argument that you can't afford an electric car, because I just bought one for $4,000. And so I feel like there are ways of doing this and achieving this. Anyway, Volkswagen is nearly doubled the number of electric cars it produced last year. I would like to drive an ID.4. I do love cars. I'm such a huge car advocate, but I'm really have become an electric car advocate. And in fact, I was trying to convince my friend who lives opposite, who drives this giant Mercedes, to get himself a Jaguar I-Pace. The I-Pace, it's a luxury car, but it's electric. It's expensive, like $75,000, but he can afford it. But he drives on his own. He doesn't have children. He's got the biggest car you've ever seen, the most gigantic Mercedes. It's like $150,000 worth of car. I just don't get it. I don't get it. Tesla is very clever, conceptually. I think Tesla is very, very clever. The fact that they built two expensive cars, the Model S, followed by the Model X, two very expensive cars, $150,000 each. And they used the money, the profit on those cars to finance the business model to build cheaper cars, $40,000 cars. And those are the ones that are selling now like hotcakes. But you can't not. I mean, Carla's argument is that there are people who are having to go into mines and risk their lives mining for these precious metals that help make the batteries. But you can't. I mean, is there another way? Are you saying what Tesla should take control of the mining as well? And Tesla should be the ones that are mining their own cobalt and their own lithium. I mean, maybe because this, the supply chain is the issue. Maybe Tesla, because Tesla make their own batteries, but when they say they make their own batteries, what they mean is that they are assembling their own batteries in America. But what they clearly need to do is they need to mine the lithium themselves, rather than rely on suppliers who are doing it in such terrible circumstances. They need to do it in a way that is more efficient, environmentally friendly, but most importantly, more responsible. And take responsibility for the entire supply chain. Should we spend the last few minutes talking about the Treaty of Paris, the treaty that ended the American Revolution? Because this is a very interesting story, and I mentioned it earlier, and I think it's definitely worthy of a mention. This is in January 14, 1784. The Continental Congress ratified the Treaty of Paris, ending the War of Independence. In the document, which was known as the Second Treaty of Paris, because the Treaty of Paris was also the name of the agreement that ended the 7 Years' War in 1763, but you probably know that, Britain officially agreed to recognize the independence of its 13 former colonies as the new United States of America. I do find it crazy that Britain used to own the United States. I mean, these were British colonies. It is kind of amazing, I suppose, and that's why Americans speak British English, or American English, but speak English. Because America used to be England. Not anymore. Only in my house. In addition, the treaty settled the boundaries between the United States and what remained of British North America. US fishermen won the rights to fish in the Grand Banks, off the Newfoundland coast and in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Both sides agreed to ensure payment to creditors in the other nation of debts incurred during the war and to release all prisoners of war. The United States promised to return land confiscated during the war to its British owners,
to stop any further confiscation of British property, and to honour the property left by the British Army on US shores, including the slaves that were left behind. Both countries assumed perpetual rights to access the Mississippi River. Isn't it interesting that these specifics, the Treaty of Paris, these specifics, even about access of the Mississippi, two S's, two P's. Despite the agreement, many of these issues remain points of contention between the two nations in the post-war years. The British did not abandon their western forts as promised, and attempts by British merchants to collect outstanding debts from Americans were unsuccessful, as American merchants were unable to collect from their customers, many of whom were struggling farmers. So in Massachusetts, where by 1786 the courts were clogged with foreclosure proceedings, farmers rose in a violent protest known as Shays' Rebellion, which tested the ability of new United States to maintain law and order within its borders, instigated serious reconsideration of the Articles of Confederation. It's very interesting, isn't it? I mean, I'm always learning more and more about the, United States history. But this Treaty of Paris that ended the American Revolution just seems to be such a specific document that is entirely general in its writing. It's very interesting. And it's also interesting to hear that, there were many people that did not abide by the treaty. And the modern-day treaty of the Paris Climate Accord, of course, of 2015. And then it was updated recently, and America left, and then it rejoined. These modern-day treaties that we still can't seem to stick to. We've already broken all of the rules of the Paris Climate Accord. But it is interesting how Paris is quite prominent here, because France has always been one of the, those kind of negotiating nations, bringing groups together by nature of its geography and its size. It's a big country, France. Very big country. We kind of forget that, don't we? Paris is pretty tiny, but France is massive. England, ironically, that colonized half the planet, is the smallest country of them all. Isn't it incredible that a country that was so small is so small, and getting smaller all the time, courtesy of natural erosion, was able to colonize half the planet. And the weirdest places as well that it would get, like the Bahamas or the Falkland Islands or St. Helena. Do you know about St. Helena? Do you know where that is? Carla's asking me if I miss anything from England. And the people don't have to bring anything anymore because everything's on Amazon. Everything is available on Amazon. The Yorkshire tea bags come from Amazon. I buy dairy milk, fruit and nut chocolate on Amazon. It's not even necessary anymore I've been started buying Branston's pickle recently, which is like a jam for cheese. They call it a, what do they call it? It's like a chutney. So I've been buying Branston's pickle. And a pot of Branston's pickle that big, which in England would cost me about 80 pence, costs me $10. $10. And the Yorkshire tea for 160 tea bags costs $11 plus tax. It's very expensive to get British products over here. But, Amazon... So there's no point in bothering people anymore. Oh, could you bring me tea bags? Could you smuggle me in some snacks?
It's just not necessary. You're just better off buying it from the proper source, and it's just better that way. Listen, thank you for joining me. I will return on Monday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 o'clock Eastern. Stay with Backchannel for your pal Hal. He's next. Have a good day.